And now we're going to finish The Grey King by Susan Cooper. This is the last chapter. It is called The Waking. This second part of the book is called The Sleepers. Will has awakened the sleepers. They were 6 figures on horseback who all vowed to Bran like a king, because of course Bran is the son of Arthur and Guinevere, transported to the future by Merriman. But Penn is still in danger, and Caradog Pritchard is still upset about the harp, which he says that she was playing. So we'll back up to the beginning of the last paragraph where we cut off. Every part of the moment seared itself into Will's brain, so that ever afterwards he could feel the quick roaring of impending disaster and see, like a bright picture, the heavy gray sky, the rearing mountain, the rippling dark lake, the startling patches of color made by a white-haired boy and a man with flaring red hair, and over it all the strange glow of a light, like the warning luminousness hanging over a countryside before a dreadful storm. Caradog Pritchard turned toward him, a face marked with a terrible mingling of anger, reproach, and pain, and at the heart of them all a thin core of hatred and the urge to hurt back. Looking deliberately into Will's face, he heaved back his arm and flung the golden harp far out into the lake. Ripples circled outward on the dark water, and then were still. Then Pritchard ran, light as a boy, throwing himself forward to the mountain, and to Bran standing there like a figurehead with the dog Penn. At the last moment before the slope he turned aside along the curving road that led back down the valley, and Will saw that he had left the small gray van there in the road and was running toward it now with desperate speed. In the same moment he realized why, and flung a great spell of prevention at Pritchard, only to have it cast aside by the protection of the Grey King that the farmer unknowingly still carried with him. Caradog Pritchard reached the van, snatched open its back doors, and brought out his long-muzzled shotgun. The same gun with which he had shot Bran's dog, Caffel. Swiftly he cocked the gun, swung round, and began walking deliberately and steadily toward the boy and the dog on the hill. He had no need for haste now. There was no cover to which they could run. Will dug his fingernails into his palms, his mind thrashing for an effective defense. Then he heard the sound of a noisy car. The Land Rover swung at astonishing speed out of the lane from Tybont Farm and round the corner to the lake. John Rowlands must have seen Pritchard in his van and his gun, all in one appalled moment, for the chunky little car rushed forward to a jerking halt almost at the farmer's feet. The door seemed hardly open before John Rowlands' lanky form was out. He stood still, facing Caradog Pritchard and the boy and the dog on the hillside beyond. "Caradog," he said, "there is no sheep here, with its throat cut. You have no right and no need." Pritchard's voice was high and dangerous. "There is a sheep dead up there now." And Will saw that the body of the ewe, attacked by the Milgwen, still up there on the ledge, was visible as a white heap from where they stood. He knew then, for the first time, why the Grey King had made sure that his Milgwen should bring it to this spot. "That is a Pentress sheep from those wintering at Clewd," John Rowlands said. "Oh, very likely," said Pritchard, sneering. "I will show you. Come and see." "Even if it were, what of it then?" "Or what of that? It is still that murdering dog of yours does these things to sheep in your own care too, is it? What is the matter with you, Rowlands, that you keep him?" His face glistening with the sweat of rage, Pritchard brought up his gun level with his waist, facing the hill. "No!" John Rowlands said behind him, his voice very deep. Something in Caradog Pritchard cracked, and he swung round to face Rowlands. The gun was still pointing. His voice pitched itself higher still, like he was a wire about to break. "Always pushing your nose out, are you, John Rowlands? Trying to stop me now, the way you stopped me before? You should have stopped me then. I would have fought him harder and won, and then she would have come with me. She would have come with me if it had not been for you pushing in." His hands were white where they clenched the gun. His words came out so fast they fell over themselves. John Rowlands stood speechless, staring at him, and Will saw understanding gradually follow astonishment on the tough, kind face as he realized what Pritchard was talking about. But before he could speak, Owen Davies' voice came unexpectedly strong and clear from the hillside above them, like a bell ringing out. Oh, indeed. She would have come with you, Caradog, never. And you were not winning the fight. You would never have won in 100 years, and it was lucky for you that John Rowlands did break into it. I did not know what I was doing, but I would have killed you if I could for hurting my Gwen. Your Gwen? Pritchard spat the words at him. Any man's Gwen? That was clear as the light in the sky. Why else would she choose a man like you, Owen Davies? A lovely wild thing out of the mountains, she was, with a face like a flower and fingers that made music out of that little harp that she carried, like no music you ever knew before. For an instant there was a terrible yearning in his voice, but almost as soon again the tortured, half-crazed face twisted back into malevolence. He looked at Bran's white head. And the bastard son there that you keep all these years to torment me, to remind me you have no right to him either. I could have looked after her and her child better than you. Bran, in a high, remote voice that seemed to come so far out of the past that it put a chill into Will's spine. And would you then have shot my dog Caffel, Mr. Pritchard? Not even your own dog, the animal was not, Pritchard said roughly. That was a working dog of your father's. Oh, yes, said Bran, in the same clear, distant voice. Yes, indeed, my father had a dog named Caffel. Will's blood tingled in his veins, for he knew that the Caffel of whom Bran spoke was not the dog Caffel who had been shot, and the father was not Owen Davies. So now Bran, the Pendragon, must know of his true, magnificent, dreadful heritage. Then a last sudden astonishment woke in Will's mind. It must have been Owen Davies who gave the dead dog his name, for Bran had said that Caffel had come to them when he himself was only a small boy. Why had Owen Davies named his son's dog by the name of the great king's hound? His eyes flickered to Owen Davies' thin, unprepossessing form, and he saw then the man was watching him. Oh, yes, Davies said. I knew. I tried not to believe it, but I've always known. She came from Cadair Idris, you see, and that's the seat of Arthur. In English, with Arthur's son, she came out of the past because she had betrayed the king, her lord, and was afraid he would cast her out, or that he would cast out his own son as a result. By enchantment of the Derwent, she brought the boy into the future, away from their troubles. The future, that is the present time now for us, and she left him here, and perhaps, she would not herself have had to go back into the past if that fat fool there had not interfered, and heard the harp, and wanted my Guinevere, and tried to take her away. He looked coldly down at Caradog Pritchard, with a snarl of fury. Pritchard jerked his gun up into his shoulder, but John Rowland swiftly reached out a long arm, and wrenched it from him before his finger could reach the trigger. Pritchard shouted angrily, gave him a great push, and leapt away, scrambling up in venomous fury toward the ledge where Bran and Owen Davies stood. Bran went to Davies and put his arm round his waist, and stood close. It was the first gesture of affection between the two that Will had ever seen, and wondering, loving surprise woke in Owen Davies' worn face, as he looked down at the boy's white head, and the two stood there waiting. Pritchard scrambled toward them. Then, murder in his eyes, but John Rowlands was close behind him. He swung the gun at Pritchard like a stick, knocking him sideways, and then seized and held him with the force of a much younger man. Wildly struggling, but grasped into helplessness, Caradog Pritchard put back his head and gave a terrible shriek of madness as all control from the dark left him, and his mind collapsed into the wreck it must now remain. And with the sleepers ridden, the last hope of harming Bran gone, the Grey King gave up his battle. The echoes of Pritchard's shriek became a long, howling cry through the mountains, rising, falling, rising, echoing from peak to peak, as all the powers of the dark vanished forever from Cadair Idris, from the valley of the Dicini, from Tal Yalin, cold as death, anguished as all the loss in the world. It died away, and yet still seemed to hang in the air. They stood motionless, caught in horror. And the mist that men called the breath of the Grey King came creeping down out of the pass and down the side of the mountains, rolling and curling and wisping, concealing all it reached, until at last it cut off every one of them from the rest. A rustling, flurrying sound came out of the mist, but only Will saw the great grey forms of the ghost foxes, the Milgwyn of the Brenin Lude, come rushing headlong down the mountain and plunge into the dark lake and disappear. Then the mist closed over Llynwygndwl, the lake in the pleasant retreat, and there was a cold silence through all the valley, save for the distant bleat sometimes of a mountain sheep, like the echo of a man's voice calling a girl's name far away. Here ends The Grey King, fourth book of the sequence named The Dark is Rising. The last book will be called Silver on the Tree, and I will put that in my pile of books to read you as soon as I get a request for it. I hope that you enjoyed listening to The Grey King, and you'll check out some of the other stuff on here. I love reading Arthurian and Celtic legends, so any requests for that you have, I will happily look into. But I have plenty already on schedule to read you guys, so till next time. Bye.